everybody, welcome to Ask Mark, our scuba diving Q&A. If you have any scuba diving questions, pop them down in the comments section underneath this video and use the Ask Mark hashtag to get yourself featured in an upcoming Q&A. Today I'm answering a question from Jeff Yu about PreDive switches on regulators. Jeff says, I have a question I would like to ask. Can you explain how does the PreDive and dive switch on the second stage regulator actually work? Many thanks. So a PreDive switch quite simply ruins the efficiency of your second stage by covering up the air outlet on the inside. Normally the air flows really freely into your mouth for a nice easy breathe, but this can lead to free flows thanks to the Venturi effect. Because the airflow is just so efficient, it basically creates a vacuum around it and keeps the valve open and creates an exponential free flow. By partially covering that outlet, it scatters the incoming airflow so that the vacuum doesn't form. So if I pull apart a second stage really quickly for you, it's basically because, well, that would be quite useful as well. It's basically because regulators become too efficient. And on the inside, if you didn't know how a second stage works, get off, is you have this flexible membrane on the front, which sits behind the purge button. And whenever you inhale, you basically create a vacuum inside of the second stage, and that sucks that membrane in. It's the same as pushing that purge button, and that pushes on this little lever. So that lever, if I get you this one that I've already disassembled a little bit, you might be able to see it a bit easier. So ignore the blue piece of string. So you have this lever, and when you inhale, it pulls down on the lever, and that opens up the valve, lets some gas in. When you stop, the gas fills up the second stage, so it pushes that diaphragm back forwards. This is spring loaded as well, so it naturally springs back out, and that closes the valve. On the side here, you'll see there's a little hole with a spring on the inside. That's where the airflow comes out of, and that's usually pointed directly into your mouth. What a Venturi lever does, or a PreDive switch, it's typically this switch on the side of a second stage. Sometimes it's on the top. Sometimes you don't have them at all. Sometimes they're actually automatic. In some of the atomic aquatics regulators, you'll see AFC, I think they call it, and it's automatic. It's on like a squidgy, like silicone mount, so the greater the airflow, it adjusts the airflow to interrupt it. But anyway, how most of them work is, you'll see this one has a shroud over it, and that actually covers up the outlet. So when you flick it to PreDive mode, it covers up that outlet. So that means that instead of gas like rushing through that outlet straight into your mouth and creating a vacuum, it scatters it. So the gas comes out and it's met immediately by this like plastic wall, and it scatters it. So we actually use this effect, the Venturi and the Bernoulli effect. They're both like Italian physicists and whatnot, but they found out that when there's a restriction and when there's flowing gas, it adjusts the like surrounding pressure. So if you have a lot of gas flow in one direction, then it actually draws more gas in behind it. And we use this in like jet engines and fire extinguishers are my usual examples. If you look at the back of the nozzle on a fire extinguisher, a lot of the times you'll see holes at the back, and that's because when the whatever's inside, because it's all different, when it's going from compressed to uncompressed, it rushes out, and without those holes it just creates a bit of a vacuum. But with the holes, it actually increases the amount of airflow, and that way it really blasts it out. And the same thing happens with our second stages. When you have that incredible airflow, if it's not in your mouth to stop it, it just flows straight out of the mouthpiece, and it just creates more of a vacuum, which holds down that lever even more, opens up the valve, lets even more gas to flow through, and you get an exponential free flow. So a little bit becomes a bit more, so it just becomes exponential. Without that that pre-dive, it will just keep going until you either turn the gas off or you run out of gas. With that pre-dive switch on, it just scatters it. So it ruins the performance. So it makes it an eensy bit harder to breathe from. So it's not noticeable. You won't go, oh, it's really hard to breathe from this. That's not what it's doing. It makes it technically a little bit harder to breathe from. You can breathe from it underwater, it will be fine, but it's going to increase the work that's on your lungs and your like intercostal muscles and your diaphragm and all that. So after an entire dive, you're going to be a bit more tired. So it's better when you're on the dive to have maximum efficiency and to be able to breathe from. But as soon as that comes out of your mouth, you should have that pre-dive switch or Venturi switch, whatever you call it, switched on to interrupt that airflow. If it is free flowing, even switching it on probably won't stop it because free flows are very, very efficient. And in a wet, cold environment, because gases, when they go from high pressure to low pressure, they get cold. You often get ice forming around this. And if ice forms when that lever is in the downwards position, it's just going to become a block of ice and just freeze that valve open. So whenever your second stage is out of your mouth, try and dial in the pre-dive lever. So the knob on the side, screw that all the way in so it's harder to actually open that valve, and then the pre-dive switch, turn that on so it interrupts the airflow, and that way it's less likely to free flow. Chances are it will just go and that's it, kind of stops itself, whereas if it's off, it will just keep going. And whenever you're in the water, always mouthpiece downwards. Even on your octo, have the mouthpiece downwards, because if you do it the other way up, then you kind of have the pressure of the water pushing that diaphragm upwards. The regulator thinks that you're taking a breath, opens the valve, free flow. So yeah, those are the basics. If it's in your mouth, have it on dive mode and open up that valve. And if it comes out of your mouth, change it into pre-dive mode, screw it in as much as possible, and mouthpiece downwards. Reassemble my regulator. Get in the hole.